Growth Pod is brought to you by Genero, a leading growth agency in the Nordics. We interview marketing experts, business leaders, and entrepreneurs to uncover the stories and strategies behind profitable growth.
Niko, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Joshua.
Before we get started on what we're here to talk about, Bob W., I would love to get some, if you could share about your background, because I think you have a really colorful background. You worked at a lot of different companies, you've lived abroad, studied abroad. So yeah, give us a kind of a brief summary of what led you up to this point.
Sure. So I mean, I grew up in Helsinki city center as a kid and went to an English school, and then because of parents' work moved to London for like high school, and then university in the States and more studies in Paris. So really got that sort of bug about going abroad and witnessing different cultures and live in this sort of, let's call it cosmopolitan life for lack of a better word. And then because I'd seen my parents both being entrepreneurs, the ups and the downs, I was like, you know what? I've been seeing in these schools that you've got these well-to-do families that are doing corporate jobs, and they're expats and this kind of thing and living the good life. It's like, why would I do entrepreneurship? I just want the upside, so I'm going to work for corporate. So then I was telling myself for ages, it's like, okay, I'm going to be a corporate man. That's what I'm going to do, and that's why I pushed myself in the career. So worked in the States and for banking and for a Finnish engineering company Metso as well, and then did suit and tie career in London after university studies and
finance or
in private jets first.
There you go.
At NetJets, which is a Berkshire Hathaway company, and in digital marketing, and then subsequently worked in banking at Barclays. And it was like trying to put a round peg into a square hole. But I told myself, hey, I want to be a banker or a management consultant and, earn my stripes and, find, this sort of hardworking, motivated environment around me. And honestly, it didn't fit, but it was a good school for, I'm clearly carved out of the sort of entrepreneurial wood, this sort of propeller head, hustler, idea man, salesman, product guy. But, doing that, being in such a structured organization, even though it was grinding teeth, it kind of taught you to be organized. It taught you to be like, have good business acumen, as they would say in business schools. But then eventually the tie was getting a little too tight around the neck. And I decided, I wanted to start a business, and I applied to, as a guise, to the master's entrepreneurial program in Aalto University in Helsinki. As we know, school's free in Finland, so it's a good excuse for a career break. And I figured I'd go and start a business in Helsinki, a tech business, and if I screwed it up, I'd tell everybody I'm here for the studies, and if I do well, then I can ditch the studies. And that's when started this fitness activities marketplace on web and iOS and other platforms, which was basically 15,000 gyms, yoga studios, rock climbing arenas in one app, and you can, pick, find new activities, find new facilities, book classes, buy memberships, etc., and facilitate that through the app with really this sort of mission of helping people lead healthier lives by finding more engaging activities or better facilities to do their fitness, and as a result, leading more active lives. And that was kind of the backdrop, and then started it with an American guy based out of Queens in New York. So I was always traveling back and forth, and here I am, all of a sudden there's no banking bonuses anymore. So I'm a broke startup entrepreneur, and I needed to make some extra money. So there was this new platform called Airbnb, so I was renting my apartment when I was on the road. And then over the years, as we were building SportsCenter, got an investment apartment and brother's investment apartment, and created this kind of like side hustle of 7 apartments. And that's kind of been the backdrop towards this the eventual venture with Bob W. Loved hosting the people, loved making the money. My apartments were some of the best ranked in Helsinki in terms of financial performance and or top line performance, and in terms of ratings based on the data that I could get. But of course, at that point, you're thinking, man, this whole Airbnb world's such an amateur show. If you were actually in control of the technology, the hardware, the IoT devices, and you had the commercial resources of a hotel chain or a real estate developer to create a space, you could actually create something that for the modern traveler that's mixing business with pleasure, spending a longer time on the road, and trying to satisfy a variety of different use cases whilst they're on the road. You could create something that wouldn't just match the expectation of hotels, but would actually exceed it for the generation that isn't looking for a hotel. And that really was kind of the backdrop there. And then finally, before we got started with Bob W., then I went to travel in Asia after I had sold my last business, and with SportsCenter, and wanted to catch break, find yin yang or zen or whatever I could get my hands on, because it felt like I've been burning the candle on all ends, not just. And so then I went to Asia to travel, and there, of course, started feeling this. Having been this early adopter of Airbnb, started feeling this fatigue towards the experience. Do you trust the host? Do you trust the pictures? Yeah, I trust the pictures, but is in the ghetto. Does the washing machine actually work? So these kind of hit or miss of this sort of very amateur experience, and then it was just easier to end up in the Hiltons and the Marriotts of the world, the big hotel chains, even though that wasn't exactly what you were looking for, and you'd end up washing your clothes in the sink in the bathroom, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So that's the story before Bob W.
Okay, it's super interesting. I think just how everything you started off with something completely different, and then using that as a side hustle, and then that created the insight. So it's safe to say it was like your experiences as an Airbnb host that led you to identify this market gap.
Yeah, for sure. And a traveler.
And then you started it together with a German guy. So how did you guys meet? How did you know him from before, or how did that end up happening?
So I mentioned I used university master's program as an excuse to get started on the business, and I was talking to I was in like Aalto startup sauna and hanging out in those sort of Aalto University, which is a very vibrant startup community around it. And I talked to the first investors. They're like, yeah, cool, we like the idea, but why don't you send us a financial model over? And even though I'd studied finance as a bachelor's, I couldn't really get something legitimate together. But there was actually a class around financing, which was related to startup financing. And so I showed up to this class. And there, the teacher said, hey, pick a real or imaginary startup and you can partner up with somebody in class and build a financial model. I thought this was a godsend. Like, this was exactly what I was looking for. It was going to be free. And there was this one smart-ass German kid who was studying abroad, which is already questionable because, study abroad kids aren't supposed to show up to class anyways. But this very smart German guy who was outdoing everybody in class, even the teacher, putting him into his place as well. And so I walked over to Sebastian and said, dude, I've got a unicorn on my hands. You got to help me out. And with that, Sebastian effectively for the semester became the de facto CFO, and with that, we raised the first 400,000 euros of venture money, but we loved, and then he went and built his career. We decided to stay in touch because, even though we're completely opposite sides of the spectrum, he's this German stereotype on steroids, and I'm this idea man, salesman, product guy. We got along super well, and we really appreciated this polarity of skill sets. I kind of kept this list of, potential co-founders. It was always damn short, and Sebastian was always on the top of the list. So we stayed in touch, and he lived most of the time in Berlin. So whenever I stopped by, we'd go grab some beers and go out for a night in the town and stayed in touch about different businesses and stuff like that. And eventually that's how we ended up together. When then I was on that 6-month break traveling Asia and, you know, trying to find myself in a Muay Thai boxing class in the middle of nowhere in a small island in Thailand. And the idea was coming together, and so called up Sebastian and says, hey, what about this thing? And, you know, started understanding that, you know, okay, the hotel market's super consolidated, and meanwhile the short stay rental's super fragmented, and we've got an opportunity here. And that's how we then met up in Greece, out of all places, a few months after that. And because we ended up investing in a property that could have been the first Bob W. It didn't work out. I mean, the investment worked out, but it didn't turn into a Bob W. But figured, oh, well, let's give it a try. Athens is a cool city and vibrant, and at that time it was on the up after all that financial turmoil they'd been going through for a decade. So we kind of took that shot. So that long-windedly, we ended up in Helsinki and starting the business then eventually in 2018. So.
I think it's fascinating how, well, first, I think a lot of these stories are just like that. It's not you don't set out with this plan. It's very, it just kind of happens, but it requires that courage to to spot an opportunity and go for it. Reach out to that guy, you know, your co-founder, and pitch him on, get him excited about the idea, I guess. Yeah. You know, having spent some time in Germany, I can imagine if he's a German stereotype, he's not going to be the guy who's like immediately like, okay, the startup idea, like this unicorn, looks great, let's do it.
Well, I think I got lucky because he had just been a part of a massive exit of a opticians chain online and in the DACH region, the German-speaking region. And that was sold to a big player, and his lockup was just about to end, and he was so sick and tired of working for a big corporate. So I think I called it the right time. I could have pitched a toilet paper idea, and he would have been up for it. So
super excited just to get out of the suit and tie. Okay, before we go to Bob W., was there anything in your first startup? I mean, that was like 3-4 years?
Yeah, I think closer to 5, yeah.
Okay, closer to 5. Was there any kind of key lessons that you took from that startup that kind of developed as you were traveling in Asia? Like any major mistakes that you were like key not to repeat, or anything that you were like, yes, that was like the key to success there? Because I don't think you mentioned it, but you exited that startup. So yeah, anything that you took with you that was really instrumental in then shaping Bob W.
Yeah, I think the first one is just, we talked about co-founders, is the most important recruitment ever you do starting a business is the founders. I would never start a business alone, certainly again, but I historically usually picked another partner as well. Because even though I think I've got some strengths, I certainly have some amazing weaknesses as well, and to appreciate that is a really important piece. Yeah. So picking a founder, and I think in my first startup, you know, I partnered up with a great guy who I got along with really well, and you know, we were good friends in college in the States. But the challenge is we were too similar. We were both sales, marketers, idea men, but then eventually somebody's got to figure out financials and strategy and operations and you know, systematize the startup and the business. And neither of us were cut out to do that. Yeah. So we had a gap in the sort of founder capabilities, and I think we really suffered from that over the years, and that you know, probably, you know, ended up being the reason why it didn't lead to the potential that it could have been.
Okay. Yeah, so polarity of like skill sets and maybe personality as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you got to have something that ties you in, which should be values. Yeah. And so then another piece, of course, is really aggressively working towards product market fit. And that was something with SportsCenter that we struggled with, and we held on too long, as opposed to doing quick pivots, or you know, trying new things constantly, as opposed to, okay, well, it works on this aspect, but hey, we'll get monetization eventually worked out, and this kind of thing. And I think that is something then that me and Sebastian at Bob W have learned from that, is that quick pivoting. And we're still to this day, if we feel like we need to change direction, we're very quick at doing that. I think we're very lucky. We've had product market fit for quite some time. But that's not a constant either. So important to stay on your feet. And of course, as business matures, you've got different challenges. And those were, I think, the sort of really the top two learnings. And maybe if there's a third one is, you know, I went so all in on the first startup in terms of my own health, my own financial health. You're kind of like, no, I don't deserve to get paid for the longest time, even when you're funded, etc. And then all of a sudden the bank starts calling you and the collector agencies start calling you. You know, the basics need to work in your life for you to get going. And I think that was between the health and relationships and financial health and all that, I was too selfless to the point that it started hurting me, which then hurt the business.
Okay. It sounds like a lot of maturing that took place that probably, I mean, if you had not gone through that journey, then you would not have been in the position to maximize, fulfill the potential that Bob W has.
I agree. Yeah, for sure.
How, you mentioned product market fit. So what did that journey look like with Bob W? And was there a point where you felt like oh, we got it, like this actually is going to work?
So yeah, I think that's an interesting question. Maybe if I sort of finish up on how we got started, and then we can discuss how we search for that product market fit. I think, you know, we ended up talking on the phone. And obviously, I'm in Asia and Sebastian's in Europe, you know, suffering his lockup and looking at the market and understanding, okay, you've got 7 million plus hotel rooms just in Europe alone, super consolidated market with brands and standards, with brands representing standards and factual standards like 5-star, 4-star, 3-star hotels, where consumers know what they get, operators know what to operate, what services to offer, and real estate developers know what to build even before they decide is it going to be a Hilton or a Marriott, because the standards are so rigid.
So they can start building this building not knowing if it's going to be, what logo is going to be on the front.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. It's such a standardized space. Now, contrast that with, you know, Europe's over 4 million short stay rental listings. There's no big brands. There's no standards. It's super fragmented market. Biggest players, the mom and pops that've got 1, 2, 3 apartments in residential properties. And then, you know, and you don't even have a name for it. Short stay rental, vacation rental, holiday rentals, apartment hotel, apart hotel, service apartments, extended stay, which Americans call for some reason, even though it can be equally short stays as hotels, etc. So, and which is a great opportunity for a brand to define who you are, by the way. And then, you know, and at that point, you know, we start understanding, okay, we know what we're going to do is we're going to create a new category of hospitality that's a hybrid, that's the best of both worlds, the best of the hotel experience and best of the short stay rental experience. The Airbnb experience, as consumers would call it, even though Airbnb doesn't own, manage, or rent a single apartment or a single hotel or whatever. So, you know, from the hotels, we would take the branded consistency, the promise. With a Bob W, you know what you get. There's standards, there's quality, there's trust, and of course the vibes of a lifestyle hotel, as well as the the legality and the scale of it. We're in commercial properties, you know, that are legit hotel licenses, and because you do 50 apartments, you can actually get some buying power on the sofas or the interior architect to make it really nice, as opposed to having a single random apartment. And then from the short stays, we took that the utilities and amenities of a home. So you can stay there for a night or two, but you've got the kitchens, washing machines to stay for days, weeks, or months. But then we also took the hosting, so with Bob W being the perfect host, and then the local authenticity. So people go to Copenhagen to want to experience Copenhagen, not a generic hotel having generic breakfast in a generic room in a generic restaurant. And so we packaged this up into this lifestyle brand called Bob W. Bob W being that avatar of the perfect host. Bob is the best sort of Airbnb type host you've ever had times 10. He's unbelievable guy, speaks 10 languages, well educated. We assume Harvard or Cambridge, we're not quite sure. But at the same time, he's super approachable, very social, right there for you. He cares about the community, he cares about sustainability, and that's evident in his apartments and in his buildings. Because we have the local artists on the wall, the lady down the road, the ceramist who did the coffee cups, different sustainable choices. So he's brought that spirit into the apartments themselves. So they really satisfy that modern traveler's needs of living like a local, and then unlike a normal host. Unbelievably, the guy doesn't sleep, have a lunch break, doesn't even need to go pee. He answers your messages in less than 2 minutes on average. If you got a problem, call him. If need be, one of his colleagues is going to be around the door in a few minutes. And so the best of the hotel packaged up into that lifestyle brand Bob W. And under the hood, the whole thing runs on technology. So on the one hand, we get rid of, we don't need a big chunk of the operational people. So we do about 1/7 of the boots on the ground, the HR, to a comparable hotel, making comparable nightly rates. 6/7 is the technology that we've built. We give our cleaners superpowers, so they roam around the building. They become our quality control managers. They also become our procurement managers, customizing the apartment as need be for each guest profile. And which means that we can play that Tetris game a lot more efficiently than a operational Tetris game a lot more efficiently than a historical hotel. And then on the other side of the ball, it's not about efficiency or just about efficiency or moving the, removing human resources and therefore human error in the most human resource intensive industry in the world. But on the other hand, it's about elevating the experience. So we've got self-service apps, which are unbelievably intuitive and loved by the modern generation, as witnessed by the taxi and the food apps and the plethora of apps that we use these days. And then we have a marketplace. So we are a full service hospitality operator. We're a full-service hotel or apart hotel, whatever you want to call us. We've got gyms, we've got breakfast, we've got early check-ins, late checkouts, we've got packed fridge product where you get your fridge full of food when you arrive, etc. But actually, we don't have any of the shared spaces. So as a business model, we don't need those shared spaces. Modern traveler wants to live like a local. So within 500 meters of the neighborhood, through the marketplace, gym is free, breakfast, you can get the bed and breakfast rate with us, and you can have this amazing local restaurant breakfast experience, which I guarantee you is going to be a heck of a lot better than the breakfast I would have to make, or that a generic hotel can offer at a similar price point. So second part is the marketplace, and third one is, of course, that amazing hosted experience, that empathetic host, Bob W., who's always there for you, always looking out for you, and just elevating that experience with him being, really making you feel that you're a local now. Because he's got he's there for you, he's got the suggestions, he's set the apartment up for you, all just perfect, etc. And that's the business model. So how do we get to that is always more of a wiggly story than
because imagine this was not, this was a very compelling pitch, and I'm guessing this was not the pitch that you were able to deliver at the first investor.
No. So just to wrap it up, let's get to the vision later. So basically, when we got started, first we were thinking, okay, well, let's create let's get a commercial property, and then we could also maybe manage some apartments around it, and manage those apartments using the hotel or the apart hotel as a hub. Additional properties, but then the reality is that we couldn't quite lock in a commercial property early enough, and we were in Helsinki. So I had a couple of apartments that I was Airbnb-ing in Helsinki, and so we think, hey, let's use that as an MVP. Let's get retrofitted lock systems, and we'll start, we'll get a couple of individuals to rent their apartments to us. It wasn't an on-scene business model. You see that all over Europe, and you see it with us. You see it in Finland as well. And we did exactly that. We had like 5 apartments, and 3 water damages. 3 water damages in 3 apartments within a 3-month period, which statistically should never happen. I mean, so we were like, okay, this is so much hassle for the cleaning, for having 5 apartments with 5 landlords, with everybody's got their own opinions. Then we're dealing with the water damages, and of course makes the friction even higher with the owners, and then at this point, we're still thinking, okay, well, we'll get to that commercial apartments, but we should also make it work with these individual ones. And that's when you started having these sort of stories in Finland around like secret hotels. So there was a lot of negative press around a little bit different business model to what we had at the time, but in that sort of same sphere of like basically residential properties being used like a hotel. Yeah. And we thought, oh man, this is not working out. We got to get out of the whole, residential properties thing. And, we haven't even gotten to building the tech yet. We're just trying to use third-party software and get the initial product market fit and the experience working. And, we talked to a bunch of Finnish landlords, like big companies, and they laughed us out of the room because one guy didn't speak Finnish and the other guy didn't speak real estate. So luckily my business partner speaks the real estate part, but real estate's a very local game. So then, and just for the listeners, so we do management agreements and rental agreements of the whole properties. We don't actually buy the properties, which is a common thing in the hotel operator space. So then through the startup circles, we got a couple of leads to talk to a few prop tech guys in Tallinn. So we thought, what the heck, let's go have some beers in Tallinn. At least we'll get a 24-hour break from it. And so Sebastian was in Finland at the time, and we spent most of the time in the summer house, just trying to parent summer house, trying to figure out how to get this thing off the ground. And then we went to Tallinn, met prop tech guys there who then suggested, okay, you got to talk to this broker guy who does a lot of these short stay rental investment opportunities for investors, and Estonia's got some more flexible laws there of how it works out. So they were a step ahead of that in terms of, compared to Finland, where we were sitting at with Sebastian. And then we ended up, we ended up meeting the guy. He's like, yeah, cool, yeah, I'll keep in mind. I've got nothing for you. And we say, okay, well, yeah. Let's talk later. And then we get out of the cafe and we're walking the same direction to the parking lot or something like that. And there's a building in Telliskivi, Tallinn, the sort of hipster neighborhood in the capital of Estonia. And there's a building on the right which looks like it's almost ready, but not quite. It's like, oh, what's this yellow building? He's like, actually, I think that is an apart hotel. I actually think the owner's a Finnish dude. I'll give him a call. And then 3 days later, we've got a handshake on our first apart hotel building. And
sorry, how many apartments were?
There were 41 apartments. Yeah. And 3 months later, and that's how we got started. And it was very quick to see that, okay, customers absolutely love this. It's going well. Consumers are going well. And then September, October 2019 started. And then we're like, all right, tourists are leaving, building is starting to be empty. We better put these different use cases to use. And I better start a B2B program here or something like that. So, and then started basically hounding everybody in the Estonian and to a certain degree Finnish startup ecosystem to rent the apartment for their relocations, for their project work, this kind of thing. And that's how we basically figured out how to make it more seasonable. Today we've got about 40% B2B, 60% consumer, which was then the last leg of figuring it out. Which is something we didn't have to do for the individual apartments, kind of tourist filled it up. And then and then so we really felt like, wow, we've really found the product market fit. Let's start to scale. And then the pandemic hit, and but I think there and I know I'm veering off the question here about finding our product market fit, but it is a part of that story, which is during the pandemic, we were able to prove that unlike a hotel, which most hotels closed its doors, we were actually able to, because of those kitchens and those washing machines and those sort of utilitarian aspects of our spaces, we were able to be a heck of a lot more resilient. All of a sudden, we've got policemen and nurses who are there for work, and relocating expats who want to be during the pandemic closer to their families. We were able to fill it up with something that we weren't normally filling it up with, which is majority tourists. Yeah. And that kind of proved to ourselves and our investors that we can do it, and that's how we managed to still get the A round, even though the pandemic was closing in on us. Sorry, not A round, seed round from Danish investor Byfounders, and really thankful that they put their trust in us, anyways. And then we used most of the first half of the pandemic, really building out our tech. So at that point, we'd have been in no-code policies. We're not building anything before we figure out exactly what the product market fit is, and then we will start building tech around it. Yeah. And that's exactly what we did. And then the second half, we actually started then expanding and finding new properties because nobody else had the guts to move, and we just figured out what the heck we're gonna sign up properties. The world's gonna open up anyways, one way or another, and then the end result is today we've got properties in 17 cities in 10 countries. We are Europe's best-ranked international hotel chain based out of public ratings, Booking.com and Expedia and all those, which is something we're super proud of, even though we don't consider ourselves a hotel. But the ratings go in the same batches, and it really tunes to this eventual mission, which was never unclear in the big picture of it, but then it got really sharpened, which is to create this 5-star experience for every guest, every visit at scale, while transitioning the hospitality industry into a sustainable one. So it's this obsession about the 5-star experience and how do you get 5 stars from every guest, and understanding that actually technology plays the key role in that. That it's important to understand the trends that give you 5 stars, but almost more important to understand the trends of the non-5-star reviews. And then when you systematically start fixing the biggest problems one at a time, eventually you're able to create something that really meets and exceeds the expectation for this modern generation of traveler. And I think that product market fit there is really evident from the reviews. Our NPS score is like 78, which is literally the best in the industry that we've heard, or not just heard, which we have the publicly available data to. And it's this, really pushing us towards this vision of being the most loved hospitality brand in Europe. But really, ultimately, we're a tech company operating hospitality.
It's fascinating and so much in there to unpack. Let's start with the fundraising part.
Sure.
So you're able to close the seed round in what must have been the most difficult time in the hospitality industry in since World War II. I don't know. Yeah. So that's fascinating, and you've raised personally over 100 million euros across startups, and 80 or something for Bob.
70 million euros in terms of published.
70 million. Okay. That puts you in a very small club, not just in Finland, but I think globally. So, what's the kind of secret to fundraising, or how have you gone about that?
I think ultimately, you need to have an idea that you believe in. You need to have a believable enough plan, and usually in the beginning it's less believable, and as you mature as a company it needs to be more believable, and you need to be able to translate that vision with energy and enthusiasm, and and with the believability. And I think for me, I've always been very, very passionate about the businesses I've done, and they've always been, solving problems that are close to heart. And having lived in 5 countries, been very much living in multiple times in that gray area, not the few nights in a hotel or 1 year plus rental contract, but the gray area in between days, weeks, months.
Yeah.
That, this kind of, it's been very, very close to solving problems that are for me. Of course, then you need to make sure that the addressable market's bigger than just me.
Yes, yes.
And but I think that being able to, you having built an idea and a plan that's believable enough, or is so believable to you that you believe in it, and you translate that passion towards it and into the vision and how you pitch that. I think that's, at the end of the day, the most important thing. Now, we talked about co-founders. I think the reason why we've been so successful at fundraising at Bob W is very much because of our tandem. So again, I'm the idea man, salesman, product guy, blah, 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 turbocharged, energy, all that. And Sebastian has that gravitas, that he knows his shit. He knows the finances. He knows the plans. He's extremely meticulous. So I think that combination of energy and vision combined with believability in having, somebody that can very systematically carve out the plan, is an amazing combo. And that goes again why it's so important to pick the right co-founder. Third one, I would say, I'm losing count, maybe it's the third or fourth.
I think so.
Is which I've always looked at quite carefully, which is what are your sort of validations, your sort of there's a term that I've used for it.
I think credibility factors.
Credibility factors. Okay, that's right. Yeah. So credibility factors is something that is extremely important to have. So I don't know. Let's say you're in the business of making the next amazing coffee app. I don't know, judging coffees. Let's pick something. For you to get an investor who was, I don't know, an early investor in Starbucks, or the ex-CEO of Starbucks, would be a heck of a credibility factor. Then, okay, well, we're going to build tech around it. Well, you probably want the credibility factor that maybe one of the founders is a tech founder, or hey, they built a similar app but in a slightly different sector before. And then, maybe there's a third guy who has done a similar business model. Maybe he's an advisor or an early investor in the company who's done a similar business model but in an adjacent industry. And those aspects start tying in together, that you've got enough credibility factors, and those change over time. Eventually the credibility factors is numbers and EBITDA and all that, and that keeps changing. But you got to be able to pool those credibility factors. Well, for one, that you actually, those help you get to the right direction in your business in terms of getting the resources, figuring out the product market fit, and then eventually scaling. And then, and then as time goes on, they change, but you always got to have those credibility factors, which are, from an internal perspective, they're resources. From an external perspective, they're credibility factors. And to have those in place, and sometimes those are vain stuff, like,
for sure,
like a good article and a legitimate piece of paper that, this is super interesting, and that's why it can go a long way. But you gotta hunt for those credibility factors, which also translate into resources.
For sure. I think, I guess it's about creating momentum. So you start off with, maybe you're not able to get the Starbucks CEO, but you're able to get someone who was VP. And you start building and building and building.
Eventually you'll have the #1 coffee latte app in the world.
Exactly. Hopefully. Okay, so that's really good on advice on fundraising, I think, and the importance of enthusiasm, genuine enthusiasm, combined with actually knowing what you're doing.
Yeah, amen.
The credibility. Speak a little bit about growth. So you mentioned 17 cities, 10 countries, I believe, across Europe. What's been the strategy behind your go-to-market and your expansion?
Yeah. So I mean, we've more than doubled our size for 4 years straight.
In terms of revenue, or
in terms of revenue, yeah. We've only had 1 year where we didn't double in size.
Okay. Where are you at roughly right now?
So
if you can.
Can't publicize the exact number, but we're in the high tens of millions of euros. This year we're doubling our size compared to last year. Year before that we tripled. Year before that we 8x'd. You know, we are constantly looking for more resources because we can grow even faster if we would have more resources.
Right.
So the engine works extremely well. So how do we expand? So first of all, you know, so a Finnish and a German dude start a business with the Finnish dude in Finland, the German dude in Dublin, Ireland. Then you end up getting a couple of random apartments in Helsinki. And then neither of these dudes have lived in Estonia, but then you find the first building there. Great, let's get going there. Now, the trouble with startups and new companies, of course, is if you're going to build a global phenomena, our company's vision is to be the most loved hospitality brand, first in Europe and then globally. You get started on that and you're like, okay, most people in Europe haven't even heard about Estonia, or not most people, but a big chunk of certainly outside of Europe haven't heard of Estonia, which they should, by the way, which is a fabulous society, and they're a great example for many of us to follow. And then we're in Estonia, so we're like, okay, we need to build legitimacy here and need to grow. So then we start looking for properties in London, England, because we've both lived there before, and then in Finland, because that's more of a home market. We think we can, you know, with Estonia, it's close enough, 80 kilometers from the capital of Helsinki. There's enough legitimacy we should be able to find properties. And that's the challenge of even though we're this dynamic tech company, this startup initially growing, you know, you're dealing with old school real estate people, you know, in way past their midlife crisis and gray hairs. So you're dealing with this old school industry, and that happens in a lot of startups, by the way. You have to deal with some aspect of the business with incumbencies. Yeah. And so then eventually, you know, we find the first property in Helsinki, and then we sign the third property in London. Why do we do that? Because again, if you're trying to build a global phenomenon, you're trying to get onto the international foray. Sadly, when you're in small enough markets, you're going to be dismissed as, okay, yeah, you can manage that small market, but how do you do in the big markets, the tough markets, you know, UK, or depending on what your product is. But you know, let's use consumer-facing tech companies as an example: Berlin, London, Barcelona, you know. These kinds of really big cities, Paris, etc. And so we figured, okay, we need to go big, and that's why we really pushed for London. We had some advisors based out of London who were in the industry. So we were using those contacts to try to get into the conversations and into the bids to get those management agreements and rental contracts. And we managed to do exactly that. And then whilst we were waiting for London to go live, we actually stumbled on an opportunity in Madrid. And we're like, okay, great. Madrid's another mega city. Let's go in there. And we got our fourth property live there. So our strategy initially was first is create credibility by being in those world recognized markets that are, you know, competitive hospitality markets, and show that, hey, we can still beat the market even though we're in these competitive markets. And then we wanted to what we call plant the seeds into different markets. So get the first property in the first country and the first city. Why? Because in this space, again, you're dealing with those local old school real estate guys, and they very much look a very old-fashioned way at business. So if we establish an entity, get revenues, have a banking relationships, that will help with the next property. So the first ones are the tough ones. So we wanted to do the tough work initially because product market was starting to be very, very clear at that point. And it did slow us down, and it made that also the deals were a lot more expensive for us. We had to, cough up some cash, which we basically don't have to do at all these days anymore. And that was, so it was about going into these, our focus cities, which are metropolitan areas with very good, transportation links, and very much younger, dynamic cities that cater to this 20 to 45-year-old urban middle class that mixes business with pleasure on the road. And so we planted the seeds in the cities, and now our focus is, and in the countries, and now our focus is to actually deepen the penetration within those countries and within those cities. So, for example, Helsinki, we've got 5 properties, and the 6th one going live next spring. In London, we've got 12 or 13 properties already.
Okay.
So London is by far our biggest market. Yeah. In Germany, we're live in 5 cities, and our biggest pipeline is in Germany. But of course, we want to create a pan-European phenomenon. Doesn't mean we need to be in every metropolitan city in Europe, but we should have a network that gives ample coverage to particularly B2Bs.
Yes, of course.
But of course, consumers as well, so that we can be the go-to choice in this new category of hospitality that we are the pioneers of.
Yeah. I don't know the exact numbers, but I think you have thousands of apartments, so that must put you in one of the leading European players, I'm guessing, in this space. Yeah,
so we've got, our portfolio is closing in on 4,000 properties. Yeah. And yes, we're in our sector, we're in the top 3.
Got it. So with the expansion you mentioned, the idea behind it of planting those seeds and going into those, getting coverage in those competitive markets. Yeah. How did you handle the customer acquisition side of it in terms of expansion? Was that ever a challenge, and how did you go about?
Yeah, I think it's always a challenge, and one thing you find with startups that your initial customer acquisitions are usually very different than the eventuals are. Yeah. So for us, our largest channel is bobw.co, when you started initially, you're like, okay, well, let's find tourists and consumers. And then eventually you're like, okay, let's find B2B. Yeah. And then, of course, as the brand matures, you want to try to find them directly to your site and what have you. And we have the highest net promoter scores in Europe. Then if you have the highest net promoter scores, you should probably put those net promoters to good use. Mm-hmm. For us, we've always seen the OTA channels, OTA being online travel agencies, Booking.coms, Expedias, Airbnbs of the world, as a fabulous low-cost customer acquisition channel. Mm-hmm. That for us, success is we find them there, we pay the 15% commission, which is a lot cheaper than most B2B SaaS acquisitions. And for us, failure is if they next time book with the OTA, but instead get them directly. And we make money on the first customer the first time as well. So we've really used that as we embrace it. Generally speaking, hotels hate them. Mm-hmm. We think it's a great partner to be having. Again, as long as we're able to then, for that relevant chunk who is going to have the potential of coming back, to actually get those directly. Then we built a loyalty program. We've built this whole, programs around retaining customers. And that's we're just about to launch. Actually, we've soft launched it already. So I think by the time this podcast is going to go out, it's already in the news. Is a brand new loyalty program, which is super exciting, super pragmatic, super understandable what you're getting. And which is immediate benefits.
Something that loyalty programs are not known for, at least in my view.
Yeah. You don't have to be scared of collecting some random points with us, and you benefit right away from it. Then we've obviously aside from Inner Circle, our loyalty program, we've built the B2B program, which is something that we can legitimately satisfy the modern next generation companies, including the startups, scale-ups, tech companies, creative industries, give a better product than that's on the market, a more flexible one. So you can get the executive there for the one night, or relocation guy for 6 weeks with his family and needs 3 bedrooms, or the project worker coming in for 3 weeks. We can capture all of that, which is not something that a hotel can do, or if you do it with random apartments, it's going to be a lot of work and validation and all that, and not the same value for money. So we've slowly built these different aspects to it, which is really that OTA strategy, the B2B strategy, and then direct strategies. And you're never going to win upfront the sort of search engine game, a search engine marketing game to the Booking.coms of the world, which are literally the world's largest spender on Google. There's not enough cash to get around that. So you have to look at different avenues, and for us, our biggest asset is the customers who are absolutely in love with us, and you will be too when you stay with us. So that's what we're betting on and continuing on.
That's so interesting. I think it's as you mentioned, if you're able to be profitable on the first order using the OTAs, and then with the incredible customer experience, you get the direct relationship built and that retention, then you have like this incredibly powerful acquisition engine. One thing that I think is always so fascinating, Bob is now 6 years old?
6 years old,
so obviously the company has changed massively. You've been the CEO since the start. Your role has changed massively. As the organization grows, your responsibilities, but also like what it requires of you as a CEO to continue leading the company changes massively. And I've seen recently you're building out your executive team, making lots of senior key hires. That's obviously something that you weren't doing in the beginning. So how do you, on a personal level, make sure that you always have you don't become the bottleneck in limiting the potential and growth of Bob?
Well, I try to stay out of the way. That's rule number one. But but I think the thing when it comes to this whole startup game and getting into starting a company that you're hoping to grow fast and go places is to recognize your strengths, but more importantly, recognize your weaknesses. And as I said earlier, I think there's, I have a few key strengths, but those are complemented with a plethora of weaknesses. And that goes back to this, why a co-founder is so important to hire, and again, that polarity of skill sets, that, different capabilities. Basically, somebody love doing the shit you hate doing, and vice versa. And that, as you grow, that's why it's so important to pick not just the right, technical skill sets, but also, again, those different, you got the organizer, you've got the hustler, project manager, you've got the idea person, you've got the executor, you've got the realist, you've got the pessimist, or you've got the optimist. And getting that mix right is extremely important to build the right kind of team. Because again, I've got those weaknesses. I spent the first 30 years of my life trying to be a generalist, as in raising the weaknesses. Why the heck would I, and of course that had value, but I think, to embrace that, okay, I'm really good at that stuff, I'm shite at that stuff, is actually really empowering, because then you migrate towards the things that you're good at, and you find the right kind of team, and you build the team around for the stuff that you've got weaknesses in. And I think that's the really important piece, that over the years is, again, upskilling the team, getting the right kind of people who will help unlock and fix the problems of your next biggest challenges, understanding that, you're not going to be the answer to all of those. And being able, having the guts to give up as part of that turf to people that are way more capable than you are. And and for me, for example, like from a management style perspective, like I'm not a method manager. Like you give me somebody who requires a lot of work and like not micromanaging, but sort of really hands-on managing and helping out. Like I do not have that organizational skills to systematically do an 8-point improvement plan on somebody to really come out and turn them into gems. I need to surround myself with people who, we give the resources to, we build the trust together and support, but they're the ones which are the engines of growth and development in their own areas of capabilities and responsibilities. So to understand that, then you build around it. It's like, okay, I'm not a great organizer, so let's get an amazing organizer who can, and it's not just about organizing, but can help operate that business. So that, you find these kind of like different capabilities. And I think that's when really the magic happens, because first of all, then you've got people that are amazing at what they do. They've got their clear turf, which they're owning and mastering. But at the same time, there's respect for others, because you've got like, wow, that guy's so good with finance and strategy and etc. And so we just hired a chief commercial officer. I came from Yotel, which is one of the industry's sort of leading players, a very forward-looking hotel chain. So to really help us unlock the next step in growth and strategies and expanding our demand side of the business. And then we also hired a chief financial officer who is like 25 years of industry experience, was at the biggest hotel chains first, and then in really forward-looking, hospitality operators. Like he was in CFO of Genero, which was the hostel company that was on the forefront of that, and really the pioneers in the hostel space. So point being is, like, again, it goes to finally that cliche of hiring people that are smarter than you and better than you. And I think that's the, so I shouldn't, in the development of, like you said, a CEO's position, I don't really deserve much credit. It's the only credit is having the guts to hire people that are smarter than you and more capable than you, and making sure you do that investment. And I would like to think that that's really brought dividends for us. Not actual dividends yet, but we'll get there. And we'll continue doing forward.
Yeah, I think that's such a great answer. And I guess that is one of the reasons why, when you look statistically, second-time founders or third-time founders tend to be the one, like the second or third startup tends to be the one that really succeeds. And I guess one reason being that from the first startup, you have the awareness of your own weaknesses, and then you also maybe have some of the connections to people that can fill those weaknesses. And if you have the lack of ego that will allow you to bring in smarter people and give them their turf, then you can build this incredible team.
I think that's a great point. And like what one of the things that I'm most proud of us as a company, that we've managed to create a work environment that's just, we spend which is just great, because we spend so much time with our colleagues, etc. We have this unofficial mantra, which is pretty close to official, which is life's too short to work with assholes. And we use it both internally, externally, partners, landlords. We always go through that asshole-orometer of is these people nice to work with? So I think we have a very low ego environment, and that translates into a very, very nice place to be at. And I think that that's probably also increased that ability to get amazing people on board and keep them. So we have a very, very, very low churn in our teams, and a very high ENPS score in the company. Of course, that changes at times, and there's certainly been tough times as well that affected that. But overall, it really feels like we're in this as a team, which is important, especially as a CEO role. Sometimes feels very lonely.
Yeah, I can imagine. Niko, thank you so much for coming on. We have to unfortunately wrap up. We could talk about this, or I could continue for a really long time, but we'll have to do another follow-up episode when you're at the next level of scale.
Sure thing.
So, I mean, you've raised 40 million earlier this year. You're doing high tens of million revenue, doubling, which is pretty crazy. You got this.
And we're profitable.
And you're profitable, and as you mentioned, based on public ratings, the number one ranked. So, safe to say, you're doing incredible. Like Bob W is doing incredibly well, and it's been many years in the making. Lots of stress, I can imagine, and uncertainty, and late nights, and low salaries, and all that. So, congratulations.
Thank you.
To you and the whole team. And I think it's just really incredibly exciting to see you Finnish/German startup like this succeeding. And I think I saw an article. I didn't read it, but the headline, I think it was in HOAS, said something about like, I want to build a brand, like about you wanting to build a brand that could beat the Swedes or something. And I think that's really encouraging that we see that in Finland. People who want to build, they think very ambitiously. I mean, obviously, it's not just about beating Sweden. You mentioned like wanting to be pan-European. Like, I think that's so incredibly exciting. So, wish you guys all the best of luck. And let's do a follow-up episode sometime in the.
Let's do that. For the record, I love our Swedish cousins. I got nothing against it. The journalists really picked up a spot, and
they have it.
Which is we do have that little brother syndrome as Finns with the Swedes, and I think we've got. And me growing up in high school in London with a bunch of very stylish Swedish chaps, plus the country brand behind him, I was always like, well, Finland deserves an equally good country brand. Of course, unique and not the same, but equally that. And so much love for them. And I would say, it's an exciting time to be in hospitality. And thank you for the wishes. I hope it's going to go fine. As my old boss used to say at Netjets, who was running the marketing and sales team, that Niko, it's going to go fine as long as you don't fuck it up.
That's a good note to end things on. So thank you so much for coming on, and best of luck.
Thanks for having me, Joshua.
Thank you for listening. You can find all episodes of The Growth Pod on Spotify, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts.